Clone Wars era media typically paints the Grand Army of the Republic as a force for good, fighting against armies of evil separatists. But as we've discussed many times by now, the Republic wasn't really any better than the CIS. Though the leaders of the Confederacy carried out countless atrocities during the war and proved that they were hardly heroes either, the Republic also had plenty of blood on its hands, and it was only thanks to the involvement of the Jedi in the Republic war effort that the leaders of the GAR weren't every bit as violent and cruel as General Grievous. Even with Jedi involvement, the Republic and its clone soldiers still carried out inexcusable acts against civilian populations during the war, and in this video, we'll be exploring 5 of the worst cases.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
The first 2 examples we'll be discussing took place during the Battle of Atraken and the Battle of Bassadro. Both of these planets were mining worlds that sided with the Confederacy but faced Republic invasion due to their control of vital ore deposits. In both of these battles, the Republic and its clone armies displayed a reckless regard for the lives of the civilian miners present on the planet, killing hundreds in order to capture resource deposits. The Battle of Atraken might be familiar to some of you, since we've done videos on it before. If you've watched those, you'd know that the Separatists carried out even worse atrocities than the Republic during this battle, unleashing chemical weapons that rendered the planet uninhabitable. But the Republic played a role in the death of Atraken as well. Before the Seps brought out the toxins, the Republic began Operation Katabatic, a devastating bombing campaign that laid waste to Atraken's surface. Through this, and other campaigns, the Republic killed thousands of civilians and obliterated Atraken settlements. By the end of the Battle of Atraken, 90% of the planet's entire population had been killed in the fighting, and many of them had died at the hands of clones. The Battle of Bassadro was a bit more obscure and much smaller in scale. In this battle, clone forces under Jedi General Empatageos Brand attempted to drive Separatist forces from yet another mining world. Over the course of the 12-day battle, the Republic quickly gained the upper hand and CIS forces retreated to the cover of a series of rock formations made out of a glassy, obsidian-like mineral. Despite the fact that they were already winning, Republic forces opted to use extreme force against this last redoubt, using concussion missiles to destroy these rock formations and the Separatist droid troops hiding there. In this, they were successful, but the blasts turned the glassy rock formations into a storm of incredibly sharp shrapnel, which tore up a nearby mining village and killed 400 innocent people in a particularly gruesome manner. The unnecessary brutality of this final attack was initially covered up by the Republic, but this backfired spectacularly when the CIS shadow feed began broadcasting extensive coverage of the Bassadro massacre, spending weeks excoriating the Republic for its callousness in the battle. These broadcasts flooded Republic channels thanks to Separatist slices, causing a PR disaster for the Republic that ultimately did more damage than losing the Battle of Bassadro would have done. So, what goes around comes around, it seems. The next atrocity on our list is less one event and more a series of events that happened all throughout the war. We're talking about the Coruscant Guard's mass deportations of entire species of non-humans from Coruscant, which happened all throughout the Clone Wars. Thanks to pressure from the RAB, the Humanocentrist Commission for the Preservation of the Republic, Coruscanti official Tanan Praji ordered mass deportations of species deemed separatist all throughout the war. This came coupled with sharp repression of non-humans on Coruscant by the planet's clone garrison, which demolished predominantly non-human housing blocks to make room for military bases, brutalized protesters, and conducted random warrantless searches and seizures throughout the second half of the war. The deportations were easily the worst part though, especially when you consider their context. The species chosen for deportation were those whose homeworlds had seceded and become major backers of the Confederacy, examples of which included the Neimoidians, Aqualish, Skakoans, Sarmerthians, and Korovars. These species were targeted with the excuse that they were more likely to harbour separatist sympathizers, which was self-evidently nonsense and a thinly veiled cover for speciesism. What makes this worse though is that a huge portion of Coruscant's populations of these species came to the galactic capital for the opposite reason. Many of them were loyalists who had been forced to flee their homes when they seceded, only to then be targeted as potential sympathizers for the political factions that drove them out in the first place. The next atrocity was another really obscure one, but it was also especially needless and brutal. In 20 BBY, the freighter Spinner crashed on Coruscant and unleashed a bunch of stone mites, extremely dangerous pests that devoured rock and metal. The stone mites destroyed nearly an entire district of Galactic City before the Jedi were able to dispose of them. Republic Intelligence Director Armand Issard was convinced that the crash had been a deliberate attack, and his agents traced the Spinner back to the Separatist planet Orleon, which was where they concluded the stone mites came from. In response, Issard ordered Republic forces to unleash hordes of mutated, extra dangerous stone mites on Orleon in retaliation. The mites destroyed every last trace of infrastructure on the planet, forcing its entire population of 800 million people to flee, and then set about eating the planet's crust, rendering it muddy, unstable, and thoroughly uninhabitable. This attack would have been an inexcusable atrocity even if Orleon had been responsible for the infestation on Coruscant. But to make the whole situation worse, it wasn't. Issard had jumped to conclusions, and the Spinner's crash and the resultant stone mite plague had been a complete accident. The Republic had destroyed a planet for no reason at all. Both the Coruscant deportations and the destruction of Orleon are especially striking because they betray the sheer bitterness of the late War Republic. The Republic hated the Separatists, the non-human Separatists especially, for daring to secede, for daring to strike back against the core worlds that had screwed them over for millennia. For a lot of loyalists then, especially politicians and non-Jedi and non-clone officers, it wasn't enough to just defeat the Separatists on the battlefield. They subjected Separatists and even loyalists from so-called Separatist species to ruthless atrocities for no reason other than sheer resentment over the secessions. This leads us to the fifth atrocity on this list, the destruction of the Neimoidian grub-hatcheries. Late in the Clone Wars, Republic forces invaded Neimoidia, the homeworld of the Neimoidians and one of the biggest backers of the CIS. Anti-Neimoidian hatred ran rampant in the Republic, and in the Battle of Neimoidia, that hatred evolved into genocide. During the subjugation of Neimoidia, Republic forces burned down several Neimoidian grub-hatcheries, vast communal hives in which the Neimoidians raised their young. This not only killed untold thousands of Neimoidian children, but it also seriously threatened the entire Neimoidian species. All Neimoidians, without exception, were born and raised in these grub-hatcheries, which only existed on Neimoidia itself. The species as a whole depended on them. As a result, the destruction of many of these hatcheries during the Battle of Neimoidia crippled Neimoidian population growth for decades to come. Later Imperial crackdowns on the Neimoidians made this even worse, forcing many Neimoidians to disguise themselves as Duros, which led to the species all but vanishing from the public eye during the Imperial period. It isn't known if the species as a whole ever recovered. What makes the whole thing worse is that a lot of loyalists would not have cared. The Neimoidians were widely associated with the hated Trade Federation, and openly speciesist attitudes about them were commonplace in the Republic. Many loyalists, and probably also the clones that carried out this atrocity, likely felt that the Neimoidians somehow deserved this. It shouldn't have to be said, but they did not. Most Neimoidians weren't involved in the Trade Federation, in CIS leadership, or in the sort of shady dealings the species was stereotyped for. And all the grubs that burned certainly weren't. Even if they all were, it wouldn't have justified genocide, which is what this was. So, those are 5 of the Republic's worst Clone Wars era atrocities. But what do you think? Has this changed your mind about the Republic at all? Feel free to post your thoughts in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.